Now for our first step here, all we're going to try to do is get a build set up that just runs off of a trigger, and it's not actually even going to do anything except get the source code. It's not going to build, it's not going to do anything else besides get the source code, and we just want to do this one step at a time to make sure that we always have success and things never get confusing. We never have to wonder, well, why isn't this working? What failed in this chain? So I'm just going to go ahead and create a new job here. Just going to click new job, and then I'm going to go ahead and choose to build a freestyle software project. And in most cases, you want to choose this. You can see that there's a default for a Maven 2 or 3 project that you can use if you're using Maven. And there's an excellent Pluralsight course on Maven if you want to know more about that. It's basically a Java build tool. And you can also build a multi-configuration project. This one we're not going to worry about quite yet. It's useful more when you're having multiple different types of configurations. Perhaps you need to specify different parameters for when you're doing a build. We can also just monitor an external job that has nothing to do with Jenkins. We're going to call this Hello World. And then we're not going to put in a description here. And there's quite a few things in here, but we're going to ignore a lot of this here. You can see that there's these help messages for almost all of these, and they're very explanatory, so they can really help you if you want to know what each one of these does. But we're going to keep things pretty basic to start off here. We're going to say that our source code management is Subversion, and here's my repository URL here. This is my machine name, svn test hello, and then it's under trunk here. You'll need to put in whatever you're using as a repository when you set this up. The local module directory is just going to be dot here. We're going to leave this as the default. For our checkout strategy, we're going to just have it use svn update as much as possible. And if you're using a different source controller, you might have some different options here. But the basic idea here is that we want to update instead of checking out a fresh copy. In some cases, depending on how your source is built and what you're doing, you might want to just check out a fresh copy every time, do a clean checkout first. One of these other options, doing a revert if you modify files. But in our case, svn update will be the fastest and work the best. We're not going to set up any advanced options here. And we're basically going to say poll SCM. Remember, this is our build trigger, and there's a schedule that we can set up here. This can be a little bit confusing, but this basic cron syntax is what's used here. And each one of these elements, you can see here that they will represent minute, hour, day of month, day of week. What we can do in our case is just put star, 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 which will be every minute. And you can see they have an example here for every 5 minutes past the hour. You can configure this however you want. I like to make it poll every minute because I like to have my continuous integration running as soon as possible. But you can read through this and change different values here if you want to try out different polling mechanisms. And this is all that we're going to do for now. We're just going to have it basically poll our source control and to check out that project. We're going to go ahead and hit save here, and our project is called Hello World. If I go back to the dashboard here, you can see we've got Hello World. It's never been built, and now we can test this out. If we just go ahead and do schedule a build here, you can see that it says building Hello World, and if we click on that, you can see the console output, and you can see what it's done here is it's basically went ahead and got a fresh copy of this workspace, and it's checked it out here, and you can see that it's gotten all these files, and this is a success. So if we go to our dashboard, you can see that we've got a blue light, which means that it is a success. And you'll notice I didn't get prompted for SVN credentials, and that's because I'd already set up this test project and provided my credentials. And Jenkins does have a property here under configure system that basically says under Subversion, update default Subversion credentials cache after successful authentication. And basically what this means is that if you already authenticate, then it's going to store those credentials and it won't keep on asking you for them. Now the next thing that we're going to add to our job here are build steps. And build steps are just what they sound like. They're just steps inside of your build. And you can see here that we're just going to go from step A to step B to step C. Whatever the steps are of your build process, we're going to chain those together as build steps and specify them in our job. We're going to start with one and make sure that that works. Then we'll add another step and make sure that works, and so on until we have all the build steps working. This is the main part of our Jenkins job. We're going to start off in our project by creating just a build step, in order to build the source control. So we're going to use MS Build in this case because we're using Visual Studio in a solution file. And we're just going to have it build the project and do nothing else, and that'll be our first step for success. Now let's go into our test project here, our Hello World project, and we're going to go ahead and go to Configure. And from here, we're going to set up a build step. We already have our build trigger, and you can see under build, we have an add build step, and there's quite a few options here. And depending on how your build works, you're going to choose the option that's appropriate. Now, if you're not seeing this build Visual Studio project or solution using MS Build, that's because this is only added when I've added that MS Build plugin. If you're using a Java project, you might want to use Ant or a top-level Maven target, but don't worry about the plugins just yet. Like I said, I've installed the plugins in order to get MS Build working, and you might want to come back here after we watch that plugin module, but I want to keep things as simple as possible. We're really trying to focus on the concepts here at this point, and then you can get the specifics working anytime once you understand the concepts. In our case here, we do want to build a Visual Studio project or solution using MS Build. I'm going to check that, and now it's going to add one step. This will be our first step. I've got an MS Build version. I set up a version called default in the Jenkins configuration. You'll have to set this up, but we'll talk about this when we get to the plugins. And then the build file will be where our solution file is, and this is relative to where we've checked out our code. In this case, we're just going to go to hello world / hello world.sln. And this will be the location of that solution file, which is our MS Build file. Remember, in Visual Studio, in the Microsoft world here, this SLN file actually is an MS Build script, very much like on the Java side, an Ant script or another build script that you might use, a make file, perhaps in C or C++. We're not going to specify any command line arguments, but we could here. And this is it. This is our first step. We just want to make sure, can we build our project? So we're just going to hit save here. And then we're going to go back to our dashboard here. We've got our Hello World project, and I'm just going to schedule a build. And I like to click here on the output so I can see what's happening. You can see it didn't need to recheck out the files because there was nothing going on here. And we got a build succeeding with no warnings and no errors. So our next step is actually working. Now this is probably a good time to check to make sure our trigger is working as well. Let's go ahead and make sure that that's going to work now that we actually have some solution that's being built, and we can verify that we're actually getting the latest source code and that it should work. What we'll do here is let's just go ahead and add an extra line here, and I'm going to save this file, and then I'm going to commit this file in SVN. So I'm just going to go into Hello World, I'm going to do an SVN commit, and I'm going to say testing. And before I hit this OK here, I'm going to bring up Jenkins, and we're going to go to the console here. I'm going to enable auto refresh. This way we'll be able to see when this happens. And let's go ahead and commit this. And now we're going to look at Jenkins, and we should see this build trigger automatically here. And it might be a little bit difficult to see. It might flash by real quick here, but you can see what this last success says. It was 2 minutes and 10 seconds ago. And you can see that the screen is refreshing. And within 1 minute, we should get our build being triggered here because we set our polling interval to 1 minute. And you can see here that now the last success says 7.4 seconds, and we're on build number 3. If we check here, we can see that it actually did work. It did do a build. It just happened here. And we can actually look at the output of this build, and we can see that it did succeed.